The big.
It is, but that's okay. You got to see, but I just won't. Everybody's sitting there. Oh, good. No one's sitting there. Okay, thank you. I'm not sure if anybody can hear me, but it is 4 o'clock, and we are on a pretty tight schedule tonight. There apparently has been a car accident, not with anybody we know, but there's been an accident. So it's delayed a couple board members. We're trying to get them on the line. So we're going to start here in just a minute because we have a lot on the agenda. I know a lot of people have come pretty far to speak and to hear what's going on today. So just give it a minute. We'll get some people, get the call-in number lit up, and then we'll get started. Leticia, is the call-in line live yet? I haven't heard anybody.
Yes, I think so. Is that line open?
Yeah, we have
Sue K's on the phone.
Sue K's on it?
but she's the only one.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we're going to go ahead and get started then. Okay, good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get the... Yes.
Sorry, there's no interpreter for that podcast. Is that fine? Is that okay? There's no... The interpreters will be live for live stream, so when live stream...
We're good. Okay, so we can get started. Is everyone here? Love it.
Aaron, this TV is on. The sound is on.
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and...
Hi, this is Mark Sims.
Hi, Dr. Sims. We're literally just getting started.
Okay.
Dean, this is Sue K.
Hi, Sue K.
I'm pulling into the parking lot.
Okay, well, take your time. Don't rush. We're just getting started in the agenda item number 1. Perfect timing.
Okay, but okay, will Leticia do the roll then?
Yeah, I can have Lynn do the roll call while you're walking in. Perfect.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everybody, this is my second board meeting as board president, so we're going to kind of muscle through this. Item number 1.01, call to order. President Howard, but I'll have Lynn.
I don't have my standard list, so I will just look at who's here. Linda Bove. Shelley Herbold.
Present. Present.
Dean Howard.
Here.
David Nigro.
Present.
Mike Manley.
Present.
Sue K. Kneifel.
Present.
Mark Sims.
Present.
Mike Gordon. Lynn Davison is here. Did I miss anybody?
No, I think we're good. So get into item number 1.02. I think we're going to postpone that one as well. Do we want to hold off on that one?
That would be great. I'm currently texting with Superintendent Hoffman, who is also being affected by the traffic issue on I-17. She has let me know she should be here at roughly 4:15.
Okay. Here's what I'm going to do, and I don't know procedurally, but I've been on other boards where we've been able to move agenda items up and down just based on that. So we'll put that one on hold, come back to it. Somebody just please remind me just so I don't forget to come back to it.
I'm sure she will remind you when she walks in. Thank you.
All right. So on the following items, 1.03 and 1.04, I know there's some folks that have come in for Flagstaff. Before we get started on those, I want to make sure that I put this at the top of the agenda so people that were coming in town from out of town didn't have to listen to the whole administrative side of our board meeting. So I was trying to give everybody the courtesy of that. With that said, there might be some folks that show up a little late or a little bit behind. We'll try to accommodate that the best way we can. But if it's okay with the group and the board, I'm going to go ahead and hold these the way they are on the agenda, and let's go ahead and start with 1.03. With that said, we've received a number of letters, emails on both these the issues that are going to be talked about today. They are on record. We did receive them. The board's received them, so they are in the public record. So that means basically we don't need to read each letter and email. We just want you to know that we did receive them and they are in public record. With that said, we'll start with item 1.03, call to the public. And as another piece to administratively, I need to limit you to 3 minutes on your public comment. So when the 3 minutes is up, you're going to hear a bell. And I'm going to have to stop you there because we're under a really good time crunch. And I do want to hear from as many people as I can. So the first one on this agenda item is Lindsay Dehoyos. Did I pronounce that right? Got it. And then I'm going to have next one is Barbara Schrag. Wait. It must be a really bad accent trick. Got everybody slow down. I'll come back to these. Lisa Ring. Okay, I'm going to... There's nobody here to speak on this. Oh. I'm sorry. Is that you, Lisa? Come on down. I'm going to put you 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Lisa Ring, and I'm currently a teacher in the Early Childhood and Family Education Program out of Flagstaff. I've worked with ASDB since 1985 and taught in various jobs in Phoenix, Tucson, Flagstaff, North Central Regional Cooperative, and for 6 years with Early Childhood and Family Education Program. I've been a teacher with the ECFE for 6 years, and like Barbara Schrag, I've dedicated my entire career to ASDB and the mission and vision of this agency. Under Barbara Schrag's leadership, our ECFE department has thrived, and I've been thrilled to see the commitment towards excellence and innovation in the field. Barb lives out every day the vision and mission of our agency. She demonstrates excellence in leadership and service, collaboration with families, partnerships with other agencies to ensure positive outcomes for children and families throughout the state of Arizona. I am dismayed that her contract is not recommended for board approval. Barb is highly qualified and has devoted an entire career to the success of deaf and hard of hearing children and leadership in the ECFE program. I believe there's no one in the state of Arizona more qualified to lead the ECFE program. Barb has demonstrated outstanding leadership in working towards increased funding to our Birth to 3 program so families have an opportunity for increased services and greater outcomes for visually impaired infants and toddlers and hard of hearing deaf infants and toddlers. As the board considers a new proposal of a 0 to 5 program, there is no one more qualified and experienced to lead in this direction. Over the past years, our agency's guiding principles have been ACT, accountability, collaboration, and transparency. If we are following our guiding principles of accountability, collaboration, and transparency, it causes me to wonder and ask the question. The board and ASDB agency need to make decisions that are based on our guiding principles and the shared understanding of evidence of successful leadership. As the board considers a template for teacher contracts, it causes me to wonder what types of decisions will be made in the future that will guarantee fair and considerate treatment of teachers and leaders. These decisions should be based on the evidence that is agreed upon within the agency for renewing contracts. Barbara Schrag is highly qualified and is dedicated to the mission and vision of ASDB. Barb leaves a legacy that cannot be touched or tarnished. She has demonstrated the 7 habits of effective leadership that our professional development team has spent a year discussing and implementing with our developing leaders. I urge the board to be more collaborative in their decision and to seek to understand from the many voices of ECFE that are here to support her continued leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The other folks that I mentioned that wanted to speak, are they here? Otherwise, I'm going to continue. Each one of these items are from people that wanted to speak specifically to item 4.12, 4.12, 4.12, and there's the last one, which is 3.02, which was Aaron Green. I got Melissa Holt, H-O-E-L. Okay, I want to make sure I have that right. Okay.
President Howard, Superintendent Reichman, and members of the board. My name is Melissa Hoyle, and I'm a supervising teacher for Southern Arizona for the Early Childhood and Family Education Program. I wanted to speak today regarding Barbara Schrag and the fact that Superintendent Reichman has chosen to not submit her contract for renewal. Barbara has worked for this agency for 30 years. The last several years have been in the capacity as director of the early childhood programs. In this position, she has embodied the agency's mission of ACT, accountability, collaboration, and transparency. She's worked many long, hard hours to help bring the legislative funding to the ECFE program, and she's been accountable for this funding by helping our department develop data collection, and she continues to this day to work on systems for that data. She's collaborated with the agency as well as with the Arizona Early Intervention Program to bring new life to a program that continues to grow and learn. She has worked long, tireless hours to bring us together as a statewide program so that we can collaborate as a department towards a common goal. And she's been transparent in all of her actions with staff. If there are changes, she lets us know about them and why they're occurring. When we learned that Barbara's contract was not being renewed, we asked many questions, and I can share with you as a supervisor that many people have come to me asking other questions. There's confusion right now regarding how changing leadership at this very crucial time, when our trajectory is upwardly moving, how will that benefit the early childhood programs? I wish I had the right words to share with those who ask, but I'm truly confused at this decision. And I would hope that as an agency, that we would also embody that mission of ACT. What's the accountability for the decision? What data shows that she's a poor fit for that contract? Years of staff satisfaction and family satisfaction surveys certainly don't point to it. I also understand that 30 years of past performance evaluations also don't speak to someone whose contract should not be renewed. So, as an agency, will we have transparency in this matter as well? I was fortunate this week to hear a talk on esprit de corps, the common spirit existing in members of a group and inspiring enthusiasm, inspiring devotion, strong regard for the honor of a group. Barbara has worked to bring that common spirit to the ECFE program. This spirit can only build our program, build our teachers to learn more and be our best professional selves. And this spirit is what it's going to take to follow ASDB's vision of providing excellence and innovation in education for all children throughout Arizona who are blind, have vision loss, are deaf and hard of hearing. Removing Barbara Schrag from the position will work to do the opposite. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Melissa. Next person I have is it Kathleen Kramer?
Hello, my name is Catherine Creamer. I'm also here to support Barbara Schrag in her position as Director of the ECFE programs. I am currently, my role at ASDB is coordinating teacher for listening and spoken language. I work with birth to 5. So I work with the ECFE program and also with preschools around the state. I have worked at ASDB since 1979. I'm not going to tell you how many years that is. It's a long time. And I've worked with Barb for many of those years in many of different roles. I left ASDB in 2010 to pursue some other options, and Barb was responsible for hiring me back. And what I can tell you in the last 4 years and what has been built has been pretty incredible. There's been a lot of growth to programs. She has supported me in building the preschool program in Tucson, which was at 6 children and now is at 29 and growing. She has helped me to support teachers around the state, both in the birth to 3 programs for children that go into the homes, for toddler groups, and also the preschool teachers. We've developed trainings, we've done a lot of training, and have really impacted services to children. As I watch her work tirelessly for children and for families. She has built the program by hiring and recruiting and hiring new teachers, the training them for their specific needs, starting new projects. Right now we have about 3 ongoing with me alone, and I know there's a lot more that are in process. So what I would like to say is I agree with my colleagues that this is a time of transition for birth to 5. It's a time of transition in the ECFE programs. I think her leadership is needed to continue on with the trajectory that we're having. It is an upward growth. It's in the middle of it. It's still growing. Things are still happening. So I would just like to say that as we go forward, Barb's leadership is very important to ASDB. I also would like to say just a thing for me personally, because I'm with teachers all the time, and it does say a lot to the morale of the agency when someone who they see as working really hard and working a lot of extra hours to not have their contract removed has a huge impact on how those teachers feel about working. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next person I have is Lindsay.
Okay, just make sure the interpreter can see me. Sorry, I'm late. I was stuck in traffic. Hi, I'm Lindsay Dehoyos. I am a former teacher of PDSD, 6.5 years. Now I'm a stay-at-home mom with 2 deaf daughters, 2 and 7 months old. Last summer, I was on bed rest in Boston, Massachusetts, and I had my daughter there. While on bed rest, I learned so much about the deaf education there. They have a very strong bilingual approach. And I went to my mom and I said, I'm concerned about deaf education in Arizona, especially in early intervention. And my mom said, I fought 35 years ago, now it's your turn, because in Boston, they're 35 years ahead. So, I would like you to really look at it through a different lens. Hearing parents of hearing babies are teaching their children to sign, and we're fine with that. CODAs, children of deaf adults, like Dr. Jennifer Hensley. She grew up with 2 deaf parents, and she's a very successful woman. And my daughter is 2 years old. She has a cochlear implant, and she already has 200 words in ASL before she even got her cochlear implant. After 3 weeks at Desert Voices, the teacher said she's already using pronouns. And other cochlear implant users are not as advanced as she is. So my point is, it's really all comes down to language acquisition. As a deaf mother, and also she has a father who is deaf, you should really believe in the experts. Know from those who raise deaf children. You need their help. So for Barbara Schrag, for her position, she's been here in it many, many years. And to be honest with you, looking at children from birth to 12th grade, we haven't seen much improvement. Thank you for getting the 1.6 million. But I feel like it's the same plan. Visiting the home, expanding more services in the home, but it's the same thing. Nothing is new. There's not enough education to the parents on how they can raise their deaf child. And not only that, there's a division between the Deaf Mentor program. They're the experts in working with deaf children. Now they're not even working with ECFE. You know, and a lot of the teachers have broken ASL. They don't have that strong foundation in ASL. And it's going back to that old school thinking. So I think it's time for a new person, a new school, a new outlook. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Thank you for your letting me speak.
Thank you. Last one for the last one for this item is Aaron Green. Aaron, just real quick, you got 3 minutes, but is this are you speaking to an agenda item specifically or
3.02?
Okay, so that's the IGA. Just want to make sure. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Mr. Howard, I know you have the leniency to give me a little bit more time. I drove over 2.5 hours to arrive here and will drive 2.5 hours to return home to speak to you today. Board members of ASDB, good evening. I'm here to speak about Annette Reitman's proposal at the last board meeting that she was given unilateral ability to end a contract with the school district, and the new proposal being offered tonight to give you some background as to the true intent of Mrs. Reitman's original proposal. First, some background. The Arizona Department of Education has found through the state complaint process that the Flagstaff Unified School District was responsible for an ASDB teacher of the visually impaired denying my son a free and appropriate public education by refusing to teach him Braille. That same teacher has been heard to brag that she has only had to teach Braille to 3 or 4 of her students over her career. This same teacher created FERPA complaints for my school district by destroying my son's educational records at the end of every school year, which is also a violation of ASDB's record retention policy. Numerous additional state complaints have been filed and won against my school district for the actions of 2 additional teachers of the visually impaired out of the North Central Regional Cooperative for not following my son's IEP, with the latest finding against Flagstaff Unified School District for the actions of an ASDB employee occurring in November of 2018. And ADE is currently investigating 2 additional complaints related to the services from the North Central Cooperative. In 2018, an ASDB teacher refused to teach with curriculum to the point of threatening to quit the agency if they were made to use curriculum in their Braille instruction. That request was granted by the former director of the North Central Cooperative, and that teacher was reassigned to teach other children in my area without curriculum. In a recorded meeting on November of 2018, the Director of Exceptional Student Services from my district and the current Director of the North Central Cooperative, that director acknowledged that the replacement teacher of the visually impaired assigned to my son lacked the training and ability to instruct my son consistent with the IEP that they themselves helped write, but that was still the only teacher assigned to provide services for my son. We have tried to meet with Superintendent Reichman in September of 2018 to resolve these issues with the poor service being offered our district and our son from the North Central Cooperative. In this recorded meeting, she made specific promises to my family to resolve some of these issues that were never followed through with. Now you should know that weeks prior to the January board meeting where Superintendent Reichman tried to establish her unilateral ability to end a contract with the school district, Ms. Reichman met with the leadership of my school district and threatened them to end the contract with Flagstaff Unified School District, and that started in October of 2018. Ms. Reichman was more than willing to end the services of more than 60 children who are deaf, hard of hearing, and visually impaired to hide the systemic problems in the North Central Cooperative. Her actions of threatening to end the contract and seeking board approval for the ability to end contracts at the January meeting represented a clear case of illegal retaliation for bringing up legitimate compliance issues with the IGA between Flagstaff Unified School District and ASDB, something that Mr. Negrano publicly acknowledged at the last board meeting. Her mafioso-style intimidation tactics at a public meeting were deliberate and calculated attempt to silence school districts across the state from bringing up legitimate issues of ASDB compliance of the contract by threatening to leave school districts 30 days to find alternative services to meet their legal requirements to provide FAPE. Also, this intimidation tactic was meant to silence parents, your stakeholders, and to shut them up so not to harm other children in the district. It was impactful and discriminatory. Ms. Reichman's actions represent the antithesis of ASDB's vision and mission statements. I ask you to judge her actions at the January board meeting and her threats to my school district against the ideas that ASDB is committed to respect, support, and the well-being of all, and judge her by her commitment to excellence and innovation for all children throughout Arizona. and finally judge her actions by the measure of excellence and innovation in collaboration with families and school districts. As board
Mr.
members,
Green, I'd ask you to wrap up if you can, please.
I will.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
As you consider the proposal in front of you today, I'd ask you to consider new language in the proposal that would ensure that the issues that the school districts are having with regional cooperatives would lead to ASDB terminating a contract with the district would be investigated prior to that termination. I would also urge you to give school districts an opportunity to appeal that decision before services were cut off. Finally, I'd ask you to consider taking action to investigate the actions of Ms. Reichman as it pertains to this matter and look into the systemic issues in the North Central Regional Cooperative that she was looking to hide by her actions. Thank you for the extra time.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Laura, I understand that, and I'm on that next agenda item, so just give me 1 second. I'll get you. Oh. Did you submit a pink form?
No, I think it's white. Look at it. It looks like it's white. It looks a little different.
Oh, I can't read this. I'm sorry.
It's typed.
Laura Hocknell. I'm sorry, Laura. Come on up. You should see this piece of paper I'm trying to read. It's faded. Someone's got a bad printer. I hear you. So again, please state your name, and you got 3 minutes. Go for
Okay,
it.
I'll talk really fast.
Thank
President
you.
Howard, board members, Superintendent Reichman, y'all, thank you for letting me come. My name's Laura Hocknell. I've been with the agency since 1997. I was a cooperative teacher, itinerant in the Southwest region before moving to Phoenix in 2002 to begin work in the early childhood program. When Barbara Schrag was hired as the ECFE director in 2014, she told me that during her interview, she laid out all the things she thought needed to change and improve within the ECFE department. I thought that was very bold and forward-thinking of her to do, and incidentally, that is a great way to describe Barbara Schrag. As a department, we did need a reawakening and to be unified. At our first statewide staff meeting, Barb spent time getting to know us better, understanding what our hopes, dreams, and strengths were, and started sharing with us her vision for the ECFE program. During that first year, she brought synergy to ECFE. As Stephen R. Covey defines it in his 7 Habits, synergy means the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. He says synergy is the essence of principle-centered leadership. It catalyzes, unifies, and unleashes the greatest powers within people. I learned firsthand that the sharing of differences and creating open dialogue builds relationships, and as Covey likes to say, sharpens the saw. In 2015, again at our statewide meeting, Barb gave us all bamboo plants and told us the story of bamboo. It grows a foundation with its root system for 5 years before taking off and growing to its full potential. Here's my bamboo plant. It's much smaller than it was in December. In December, it was like this tall. And it was doing really well, and I made a mistake, and I put it in the window, and the stalk started turning yellow. I had to cut off the part that was living in order to save the plant. So, when Barb gave us our plants, she asked us to commit to her plan of training and change, knowing we needed to strengthen our foundation so we could reap longer, stronger, and better results. I knew at that point Barb was taking us in a solid, forward-thinking direction for the first time since 2002. I felt like we finally had a director that was going to make our program effective and have lasting impact. Under Barb's direction, we have gone from overseeing part-time providers delivering ECFE services to being the main providers in the home. This has given us greater control over curriculum and supports we provide to families. With the initial move of removing us from the role of service coordination to direct services, we made a huge paradigm shift and families started getting better services and results. This was a start and definitely not enough, and we knew that we needed to better our skills. Under Barb's direction and planning, we got ongoing training to enhance our ability to support children whose parents choose a listening and spoken language approach. We also continued to search for someone who could coordinate the Deaf Mentor program to provide added support for families who are choosing to use ASL as their child's first language, as well as provide an opportunity for all families to learn more. I'll jump to the end. In my humble opinion, it is extremely short-sighted to learn of the decision or the suggestion to not renew Barb's contract. Barb has brought vision to this agency. She has passion, knowledge, and determination. She has followed through with everything she promised she would do for our program. She remembers that we also serve kids with visual impairment. We are nearly fully staffed, and without her vision, we would not be where we are. Under Barb's leadership, we have set in motion opportunities for further growth, increased services, and training opportunities for our new hires. I am asking that you reconsider renewing Barb's contract and allow us to continue moving forward, continue with our momentum, rather than cutting off the pieces of growth that we've had and making us start all over again. Please don't cut off our momentum. Please allow Barb to carry us through. There are so many more things we would like to do, and we are growing. And I respect Lindsay, but I disagree. We are trying to reach the entire continuum for deaf and hard of hearing, and also serving our visually impaired families.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Okay, I have no more pink cards that I believe, so I'm going to move to the next agenda item. Say that again. Actually, yes, sorry. I'm going to actually jump back to item 1.02. Superintendent Hoffman, thank you for making it through traffic. I heard it was not fun, so go ahead.
Thank you, President Howard and Superintendent Reichman. And I apologize to everyone for my tardiness. The traffic was horrendous, but the silver lining on that was, as I had the chance to actually walk through campus, I had a chance to see some students in action. I saw students on the track and field practicing with their coaches, as well as the girls' basketball game as I was trying to find the room. So I apologize sincerely for my tardiness, but it was great to see the campus as well as I walked through. I wanted to take this opportunity this is just finishing my second month in office as Superintendent of Public Instruction, and I wanted to share some updates of what we've been working on and make sure that we're one of the privileges of being superintendent is that I do get to serve on various boards as well as represent the department. And so not only do I serve here on the Arizona School for Deaf and Blind Board, but also the Board of Education and the Board of Regents. And so I do see my role as also making sure we're building bridges between the various educational agencies and boards. And so I wanted to make sure we share some of the highlights of what we've been doing in our department. So in the first 2 months, we have started various audits. We just completed a capacity review, an internal capacity review that was completed by an organization called the Council of Chief State School Officers, or CCSSO, and they helped us to identify some areas where we're doing well and other areas where we still need to work on. And for example, one of the things they noted that we should continue to work on is having a strong, clear vision that our entire department can be aiming towards, and that we can also share that clear vision with the community. So that's one area that we're going to be working on as we create a strategic plan for the department. And we're also working towards doing an audit, which is going to be more of our financial operations as well as our IT and data systems. We have an audit committee that we have assembled that are school finance experts from across the state. And so the committee has met a couple times, and we are soon going to be learning about the scope of the audit and moving forward with that, because it's very important to us that I can be held accountable for our school finance systems and IT systems, as well as making sure that everyone is receiving their funding in an efficient way, and also that the public has trust in our data and in our finance systems. So that's been a great action there. We also have our policy team that's been very active down at the Capitol. We've been signing in support and in opposition to various education bills. And of course, we're always looking to see which bills are going to help our students, all students, be successful across the state, and doing everything we can to support that. So one example where we already had some success was we supported the bill that reduced the restrictions of the 4-hour ELL block. And that was very important to us as an administration that supports the diversity, that actually celebrates the diversity within our state, and also supports multilingualism. So we were very happy to see that pass unanimously. That's just amazing to have such bipartisan support. And so the last thing, I'm going to make a quick plug that for all families and educators, I hope you're following our social media pages. We have new official pages, as well as we're updating all of our official Department of Education pages so that you can stay informed about all the great things we've been doing. And also, if you want to share with us some of your achievements, we're always looking for student stories or educator stories to highlight. And so my Twitter account is at SUPT_Hoffman. And then on Instagram and on Facebook, it's Superintendent Hoffman, all written out. So I hope you're following along, and also tag us if you'd like us to highlight something great that's happening in your community. And thank you so much again for having me here.
Thank you, Superintendent. Okay, I'm back on track. Item 1.04. This is called to the public on non-agenda items. Not yet. I moved these up. I moved this one up. So with that, the folks that have filled out a yellow sheet, if you might want to kind of move up to the front, that way you don't spend a lot of time coming up to the microphone. It might be just a good idea to sit in the front row. That's just a suggestion. One other thing I want to point out on the procedure here is I'm allowing 3 minutes for each of you to speak, and I think that's adequate time for you to try to convey your point. You will hear the alarm like you heard earlier. I'll let you go over a little bit, but I want to be sensitive to everybody's time on the board. And last of all, on the speakers may offer objective criticism of ASDB operations and programs as concern them, but in a public meeting, the board will not hear personal complaints about ASDB employees, nor against any person connected with ASDB. Other channels provided for board consideration, disposition of legitimate complaints involving individuals. I want us to keep that in mind as we're hearing this type of testimony, if that makes sense. With that said, first person I have is Danny Lawrence. Is Danny here? I know you had a long drive. I appreciate you coming down.
Mr. President, many of the speakers that I filled out speaker cards for thought they were speaking at the end of our session today. So my family, the Green family, and my last name are the only people currently here. I think you have a stack from us. I just wanted you to know that.
Yes.
So if you aren't allowing comments at the end, I will call the speakers off.
Let me try to wrap this up a little bit into maybe this works. If there's a consistent message, if you're all are conveying the same message, there may be some time saved there. I'll afford a little bit extra time for that if that's the case. If not, let's roll through these because it's going to take some time because I got 14 slips here at 3 minutes each. So we might be here a little bit. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Not what I thought we were doing here today, but okay.
Okay. Doing my best.
All right. I appreciate that, and I will try to stick to your time frame as quickly as I can. ASDB Board, thank you all so much for the opportunity you've extended my family and my friends to be heard here tonight. We traveled from Flagstaff and will again travel to Tucson in May to be with you to continue to press for some change in this organization and the way services are disproportionately allocated in regional cooperatives. It's long overdue, and I think you know it. Let's first start with a discussion about the real crisis in this organization, and that's the crisis of ASDB's lack of effective leadership. In our situation, we started with Superintendent Kohler, who said in writing, "My child wasn't blind enough for instruction." We have evidence of a regional director intentionally denying my family's approvals for technology, and we've experienced at least 3 VI instructors who were allowed to selectively quit working with our family, not because my son was problematic, but because his parents were demanding curriculum-based instruction and the inclusion of accommodations in his instruction. The leadership of this organization allowed it and still does, as evidenced by the fact that we're no longer allowed to communicate with the director of the North Central Cooperative. No one in my family has abused your staff. There have been no name-calling, no threats, no ultimatums, just difficult question asking. When we asked difficult questions, the superintendent was threatened to cancel our service contract with Flagstaff Unified School Districts just this year. After I refused this agency's incompetent services in December, those threats still amassed in your last meeting. The Ombudsman's process has been a joke for us. There's not a lot of follow-up. The trust-building efforts are destroyed by whatever happens with the administration, and these retaliation practices in dealing with our family continue. Leadership can't be great. You can't be great without it, and clearly we aren't following the mission statement of this organization for education for all children, and there appears to be zero ability to minimize conflict or support staff. Next, let me share that I'm a businesswoman. I too serve on many volunteer boards of directors at both the state and national level of my organization, so I understand what some of you are facing as volunteers, and I sympathize with it. In an open records request we made of this organization, It was clear that ASDB didn't keep records of expenditures, a violation of state policy, and also proved in the FERPA violations found against our school district. It seems that reckless business practice continues. A quick look at the financials speak about the huge problems. ASDB bites the hands that feeds it. And it's stunning to me, really. It appears that 49% of the revenues of this organization come from children serviced in regional cooperatives, but don't get actual service. As a business, and it's a business, and disability is a business, isn't it? And ASDB clearly only funds and supports the most restrictive environments for its students. It's shameful, and this is not 1950. Don't let this administration tell you that the cost of a few buildings justifies the inequity. And finally, I wanted to take a moment to tell you that my story isn't unique and that will be exposed. As I reach out, more families serviced in regional cooperatives share an eerily similar story. Not every family can afford the private services we've paid for this year. Not every family can take a day off of work and attend a meeting over 250 miles from their house. Most people couldn't take the time, and they just accept the mediocrity of these services. Unfortunately, you now have a family with nothing left to lose. And our voice is growing louder by the minute. I used to worry as a mother and stare at the ceiling. I used to have to pet the egos of your staff and your directors and your administrators to make sure everybody felt good about doing their job. Not anymore, because my child is laughing again. He's learning at a rate that would have taken a year with services at ASDB in just a short 7 weeks. And you can end your cooperative agreement with FUSD, but you won't silence me. You'll just fuel the raging inferno of hurting 60 other children in my community. My town is taking notice, our representation is taking notice, and the media is now involved, and we have a pending Office of Civil Rights complaint against ASDB for the way your administration and regional cooperative system has hurt my family. ASDB chooses who they serve, and clearly this organization is choosing not to serve my beautiful child. We don't want your meager services, but as Dr. Maya Angelou wrote, when we know better, we do better. I did better for my son, and I have a responsibility to do better for other children serviced by ASDB. It's long overdue, and I hope this board will continue providing the guidance needed to make change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lawrence. Appreciate that. Next on the item, next person to speak is Mila Buenas. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Not here yet. I'll set her to the side. I've got Amanda Steele. Set her to the side. Susie Turry. Set her to the side. Gina Blair. Set her to the side. Pamela Lang. Okay. Erica Smith. Courtney Burnett. Holly Patel. Kate Green.
Hi, my name is Kate Green. I'm a 13-year-old student at Flagstaff Unified School District. Today I'm here to talk about the lack of service that ASDB and my school district aren't providing my visually impaired brother, Sawyer. I'd like to talk about this part of the guide that you all don't see in my perspective on the current situation. You all don't see the parts where my parents who are responsible for taking care of me and my brother are up to early hours of the morning, sacrificing their mental and physical health, fighting for my little brother's capability to be a productive member of society and be able to read. I personally cannot comprehend why they need to do something like this. They didn't choose to have a blind son. I also can't think of any other job in the real world where you're employed to do a specific job and then have the option not to do it and still get paid at the end of the day. But somehow the service providers that are supposed to be teaching my brother how to read just decide not to. I mean, you couldn't get a job at McDonald's and show up to work and not flip a single burger and expect to be paid at the end of the day, and much less keep your job. My brother isn't going to be able to go to college for something he's passionate about or go to college even at all. This is because of your incapability to help provide my brother services. These people need something different to be able to do the same thing I can, and I think that they should have the opportunity no matter what they're born with or what they develop over time. They should be able to be honor roll students and have equal opportunity to graduate. The Arizona taxpayer money is going to paying people that aren't doing their jobs and are just screwing over innocent people. My brother should be able to have an equal opportunity at success, and you all are denying him that. It doesn't seem very fair to me. We're talking about a human being.
Thank you, Kate. I appreciate that. Next person I have to speak is Sawyer Green.
Hello, I am a kid you are all fighting for over. And that just doesn't seem very professional to me. My name is Sawyer and I'm 11 years old and I live in Flagstaff, Arizona. Just because I'm a kid with an eye problem, that does not mean I should not be able to go to college. I like to be able to learn, and I think kids with eye problems or any other physical and mental problems should be able to learn and go home to their families. My eye problem is called blindness. It is a very serious eye problem because it leads to blindness. And it is a very rare eye problem because only 300 people on the planet have it. But we are 1 out of 4 families in the U.S. that have it. I need to know Braille and I need to use a computer. I need your help, but I don't want to leave my family to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sawyer. Now I have Aaron Green. Welcome again, Mr. Green.
Good evening again, ASDB board members. Thank you for the opportunity to also speak on a non-agenda item. I would like to bring to your attention a problem that is inherent in the regional cooperative model of services provided by ASDB for visually impaired children in hopes that you can take some action to resolve the issue. No central leadership and administration of the cooperatives, long travel times between schools, teachers of the visually impaired with high caseloads, no statewide standards for Braille or keyboarding instruction, and unfilled vacancies in the cooperatives lead to decisions about services being driven by the availability of ASDB resources rather than the needs of children to receive a free and appropriate public education. The result of this is inadequate and poor services being provided to children that need time and consistent repetition to become truly proficient in Braille and keyboarding. In many cases, ASDB provides a warm body, but not an education. TVIs in the rural cooperatives are forced to focus on magnification rather than actual Braille and keyboarding skills to the detriment of students' long-term potential. Ruby Riles published a paper in the Journal of Visual Impairment and Blindness that showed Braille readers have a statistically significant higher rates of employment, higher levels of education, higher levels of annualized salary, and are more self-sufficient than visually impaired readers that rely upon magnification. Magnification technology has its place, but should never replace a solid foundation in Braille literacy. But that's not what's happening out at the regional cooperatives. Please enact statewide standards for Braille literacy for your visually impaired students. Require set benchmarks for annual Braille learning. Don't allow TVIs not to teach Braille to visually impaired students. And please require your TVIs to actually be proficient in UEB Braille by requiring them to get and maintain a national certification in Unified English Braille. Not taking these steps ensures the failure of the instruction you are woefully providing. Visually impaired children of Arizona deserve better than the half-hearted effort that is currently being rolled out of the regional cooperatives across the state. Thank you for your consideration and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Superintendent Reitman and the rest of the board, I have a quick question procedurally on this item since there are still a number of slips for folks that might be coming out of town. Is it outside the purview of the board to hold this agenda item until later? I'm just asking to put a pause on it just in case people do have travel from Flagstaff to speak. I want to give them adequate time and transparency to do so.
I honestly don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
And based on that, I'm going to go ahead and pause it and we'll come back to it.
Dean, this is Mark Sims.
Dr. Sims.
You can have a motion to delay the agenda item till later.
Thank you. Do someone entertain a motion?
I'd like to motion that we can
delay the.
Yeah, there you go. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, everybody. We'll come back to that one. Now I'm on agenda number 1.05, executive team reports.
Remember, there's no formal presentation. You just have the written report. If you have questions on IT, HR, operations, and agency relations, now's the time to ask.
Are there any questions from the board based on the reports that have been submitted? Hearing none, I'm going to move to item 1.06, information items and discussion assistant superintendent report.
Good afternoon, President Howard and board. You have received the report from the 5 regional directors, the 2 principals, the AUD team, as well as the directors for deaf and blind programs. As I did in my January report, I'd like to kind of highlight some of the opportunities and activities that align to our strategic priorities. Under communication and relationship building, PDSD continues to develop and strengthen their vocational partnerships to offer experiences to their high school students. Many of their students are currently involved in internships at Bookman's, the Sunny Slope Thrift Store, and Larry H. Miller, as well as Starbucks. After the discussion at the January board meeting about offering contracts to teachers for the 2019-2020 school year, principals, directors, supervising teachers, coordinating teachers, some of them were able to give input to develop an information sheet that has been passed to the teachers along with the draft contract that you had for discussion. This information sheet was included in kind of a what about contracts, the why of contracts, a little bit of history about contracts. Contracts were offered in the 80s to teachers at ASDB. We did some historical research and some audits. The contracts, if board approved, would be being rolled out so we can try to ensure that we have our staff ready for the start of the new year, understanding that finding the highly qualified teachers and keeping our excellent staff that we do have is an important priority. Both HR and I have been answering questions to try to help clarify any questions about the contracts. The Arizona Braille Challenge was held February 19th with 44 students from across Arizona that participated at the Tucson campus. Both parents and students were allowed to attend sessions on independent living and having active lifestyles. February 1st, the regional cooperatives held their second summit that included supervising teachers, and the focus of the summit was to discuss and seek ways to improve services to the districts and students. Registration information, a little plug for Camp LEAP. Dr. Jennifer Hensley, the Director of Blind Programs, has put out registration information for Camp LEAP. Under our priority of academic achievement and student engagement, both the Tucson campus as well as PDSD have been working with Mary Winterstein, who's a literacy consultant, and teaching structured literacy. With regard to our campus facilities, the NCR lease will be coming up in November of 2019, so they are actively looking for the best space utilization for the NCR cooperative. And that completes my update.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you again. Item 1.07, Superintendent's Report.
Good afternoon, President Howard, Superintendent Hoffman, members of the board, Assistant Superintendent Rex, and those of you in the audience. We appreciate you taking the time this afternoon to participate in this board meeting and the significant discussions we are having. I'm going to start with, as I like to do, with the story, of course. I have a new story. Have you heard the story of a lily flower? Anyone? No? Okay. Many of us have seen pictures of the lily flower, and they're beautiful. They're flowers that seem to float on top of water. But did you know that the lily flower actually is born in mud at the bottom of ponds and lakes? When they germinate in the mud, they're at the bottom there. And they start growing out of the mud with a little pod on top of the stem. And then the stem starts to grow through the murky water, through the mud, through and around the fishes, the insects, the floating debris, the dead logs, the tree roots, and it keeps wending its way up. What is it doing? It has a goal. The goal is to get to the top of the pond, the lake. And when it gets up there, then it can blossom. But there's a lot of obstacles. The water is dirty, it's muddy, it's murky, it's confusing, it's chaotic. But the lily stem is persistent. It keeps growing and growing and wending its way around the obstacles, the chaos and the confusion, until it gets to the top, the surface of the water. Once that pod breaks through the surface of the water, then the pod opens up slowly, bit by bit, into this beautiful flower. And that is us today. We are like the lily flower. Our goal here at the top of the pond is that our students will graduate from high school, college, and career ready. That's the goal. That's what we're shooting for. We want our students to have the same academic, social, emotional, vocational skills that their counterparts have, other high school graduates. So when we want to get there, we have to be persistent. We have to keep reaching for that goal. But in the murky water, in the confusion and the chaos, it's very easy to get distracted. It's very easy to lose our way. So we have to have a plan, these strategic plans. And as you know, we have 5 strategic priorities that I proposed to you last July. This agenda, this afternoon meeting really fits in. If you look at the agenda, it fits in with the 5 strategic priorities. Let me give you some examples here. For example, we will be talking about the agreement with school districts, and that fits in with priority 1, the communication and relationship building that's so critical to ASDB and to the school district throughout Arizona, and for you to be involved and become more informed about what we do in the regional cooperative. Another example, I'm talking about strategic priority 2. We will have a discussion about maybe being able to integrate the 0 to 3 with the 3 to 5 programs to become a statewide early learning program. That's on the agenda this afternoon for discussion. Priority 3, we have academic achievement and student engagement. We have 3 things we're talking about this afternoon that fits into that priority. And that is the math curriculum. You'll be hearing a presentation about that. You will be asked to adopt the math curriculum. Let's see here, I have 2 things. The feasibility study for our Adjourn program that fits into academic achievement and student engagement, and also the agreement with school districts. Priority 4 is staff development and leadership. we are talking about teachers' contract as part of retaining highly qualified teachers on staff. And then, of course, priority 5, when we talk about resources and facilities, we will have a report from Shana Cooper, our Executive Director of Business Services, who last week met with the Board Finance Committee to provide detailed information about our current finances and budget. And we'll be giving you that information as well. I suggest to you that maybe sometime this summer we can get together and that we together can look at the 5 proposed strategic priorities and start putting in specific objectives we want to accomplish in the next 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 or 5 years. That's my suggestion to you. And finally, I'll close with an invitation to come to a meeting. We will have a steering committee meeting, strategic plan steering committee meeting internally within the agency on April 17th, 1 to 4. I'll send you an email inviting you. And during that steering committee meeting, we will be sharing with each other innovative things that are happening within the agency that maybe we don't know about. So we'll invite you to that committee meeting for you to learn more about what we're doing within the agency. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any questions? Okay. For item 2 on consent, I'm looking to entertain us to go into e-session to have a conversation about some processes.
Yeah, the question here on the table is, can we call an executive session just to talk about the process for the consent agenda?
Okay. Well, I think there's been a number of communication back and forth to the board specific to what is. You're going to pause me? Go for it.
Indeed, if it were up to me, I would ask the board if there are agenda items that we want to pull out to remove from the consent agenda. We would then act on the consent agenda item. And then the ones that we've pulled out by motion, we can then go into executive session to discuss those individually.
Correct. That's not necessarily my question.
Right. So I really think you're asking for legal advice.
Correct.
Yes.
It's outside what's on consent agenda, specifically to procedure and legal advice on how that procedure goes forward. Yeah, thank you. Well, please come up and repeat what you just said, because I think it's important.
Good afternoon, is that better?
That's better. Please make sure to state your name. So
Sure. I'm Deborah Sterling. I'm an Assistant Attorney General from the Attorney General's Office, and I work with ASDB on various issues. Yes, you can go into an executive session to obtain legal advice on any agendized item.
Okay, with that said, I think there's a need for some legal advice based on process of these agenda items and these consent agenda items specifically.
Then the board needs to make the appropriate motion, and we can go and vote on it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hope I was clear on that. Entertain a motion?
I move that we go into executive session to discuss the process of handling the consent and non-consent agenda items.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Let's go ahead and move into executive session.
We move to that direction. There's a classroom that's open for us.
We need to read something.
There you go.
Okay, now we're live. Go ahead.
Pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A1, the Board of Directors may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public for the purposes of discussion and consideration of employment matters as it relates to agenda items 4.01 through 4.15. Also pursuant to ARS 38-431.03A4, the board may go to vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public for discussion, consultation with the attorneys in order to consider its position and instruct its attorneys regarding contracts that are subject of negotiations in pending or contemplated litigation or in settlement discussions conducted in order to avoid or resolve litigation, specifically 3.02.
Thank you.
like, I feel like I'm like,
I know, it's like you're a rock star at a concert. It's like going down. I understand. I think we're all back. Are we back on the phone lines too that have been transferred over? Dr. Sims?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay. Procedurally, do I need to make a motion, or are we just back in regular session now? So we're back in regular session. Okay. Item number 2.01, consent agenda item. Approval of consent agenda items consistent with board policy include items 3.01, 4.01, 4.02, 4.03, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm reading these for a reason. 11, 12, 13, 15, 6.01, 7.02, 7.03, and 7.04. This is consent agenda item. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda item? Oh,
No,
sorry.
this is Shelley. So 4.01 down through 4.14 is being held off for discussion in executive session, correct?
Are you requesting those items be pulled off consent and for
Yes,
executive?
I am requesting that those items be pulled off and we go into executive session through 15. So 4.01 through 4.15. I would like to go ahead and vote to approve. One moment. 3.01.
Wait a minute.
6.01.
She's got two motions. Hold on one second. You've got to do one motion at a time. So the very first motion that I think I heard was that you would like to remove items 4.01 through 4.15 to go into executive session. Is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? I'm not hearing a second. And based on that, the motion fails. Am I not mistaken? Shelley, did you have a second motion for those other consent agenda items?
No.
Okay, I think now I need to go back to the original motion of, is there a motion to approve consent agenda items as read for item 2.01?
Shelley, perhaps you wanted to limit the scope of the original motion?
You know, I guess I'm not really understanding.
Let me see if I can clarify. If there's an agenda item in the consent, Shelley, that you would like to have removed, one in particular, two in particular, or all of them, based on the original motion, that can be pulled off and have a discussion in executive session. So your original motion to do all of those failed for lack of a second motion. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And based on the question to my right, did you want to revise another motion for a specific item, or are you okay where it stands?
No, I was hoping to pull out all of them. All listed under human resources because I wanted to go through all those to make sure that we were in agreement.
Okay, I understand. So I'm back on the last motion of approval of item 2.01 consent agenda items as listed. Did I have a motion? I don't have a motion yet.
I'd move that we approve the consent agenda items as listed.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Mark Sims here, I second.
I got a second.
Linda Book seconds as well.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
The ayes have it. So moved. Now we're on to item 3.01, if I'm not mistaken. No, sorry. That was consent. Now I'm on 3.02. Information discussion item, intergovernmental agreements with school districts proposed or proposal. Superintendent Reichman.
Yes, back to me. Yes. You have a description of a proposal to change the process of how we share information with you, the board. Just to give you a little bit of background, you probably already know this, but I want to remind you, is that school districts generally have responsibility for providing safe, free, appropriate public education under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. When you have a student that's identified with a disability, then the school district is to put together an IEP team. That is the Individualized Education Plan team. Includes school district staff, includes parents, and includes other professionals. During the IEP team meeting, then they identify on measurable goals, academic achievement goals for the students and the kind of supports that are necessary to achieve those goals. In Arizona, school districts have the option, if they want to reach out to ASDB and request an agreement. And that agreement allows ASDB to use our itinerant teachers to go into the school district and provide supports to students who are deaf and hard of hearing, blind, and visually impaired. You've already heard a lot about that this afternoon. So when the school districts make that choice and they contact us, the process as it's been all along is that we send the school district a template. They review it, their administrators sign it, their attorneys sign it, sometimes the school board president signed it, and then they send it to us. The Assistant Superintendent Rex reviews it, she signs it, and she sends it to the Arizona Attorney General's office. They review it, then they sign it. And oftentimes, the minute it's signed, we already have started to provide services. Then at the next board meeting, under the consent agenda, we will list that school district as having an agreement with ASDB and ask you to ratify it. That's been the process. I'm proposing that we change that so that you become more informed and more involved and have a better understanding of our relationships with school districts around the state of Arizona. What I'm proposing is that anytime we have a new school district, a school district that we have not had an agreement with before, that we provide that information to you. We present to you, we have a new school district who wants to have an agreement with us. They have so many students, blah, 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 so that you know of the new school districts. Those school districts whose 5-year agreements expire and they want to renew, we will just put the renewal of agreement under the consent agenda and leave it there. If we have a school district asking for an agreement and for services and we say, oh, because we don't have enough teachers, we need to let you know that as well. And that is and does happen, mostly here in the Phoenix metropolitan area. If a school district themselves let us know they want to terminate an agreement, we can also inform you of that. That a school district has let us know that they want to terminate the agreement because whatever the reason may be. Most of the time it's because the school districts have hired their own teachers. they can provide the services themselves. And then finally, of course, any terminations that I would propose from ASDB with the school district, we will, on the next agenda item, have a vote for you to revise the policy that confers you direct authority to approve or not approve my recommendation as superintendent to terminate the school district agreement. So that's what I'm proposing that we do from here on out.
Any questions?
Can I ask, this is Mike Manley, a quick question, like, under what circumstance would ASDB choose to terminate an IGA with a district?
Well, we've asked people who have worked in ASDB for more than 30 years, and it's never happened. ASDB apparently has never considered terminating agreement. The fact that I considered terminating an agreement last fall, apparently it's the first time that we even considered it, that we even mentioned it as a possibility to a school district.
Superintendent Reichman, my question is, for the initiation, what's the reasoning for being presented a new IGA to the board as opposed to having it kind of completed in the order and course of the agency business as it is now?
My reason is to make sure you are fully informed, that we are transparent about the relationships we have with school districts, so that when the future question comes up, you already have information about our work with school districts. If you, in fact, prefer that that information not be presented formally to you, I'm certainly fine with that. I just want to make sure that you are comfortable in getting all the information you need to understand our work with the school districts.
I could add it as an informational item in my report. You know, we've brought on 3 new districts. We're serving this many kids, if that would help.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out why, we need that new, why we need that new procedure. I mean, in these relationships, we're basically a vendor, right? I mean, the school districts can hire their own staff to provide these services. They're the ones that hold the IEP. They have the responsibility. They can, either hire us, they can hire a third party, they can build their own expertise and hire their own staff to deliver those services. It's up to them. In terms of the capability, you had mentioned you present a plan as to how we're going to grow our capacity to serve that. I mean, these are fee-for-service relationships for the most part, where we'd be receiving additional funds to provide them, and I would think that we'd either grow or contract our workforce accordingly. That's what we do now, right?
That's an accurate summary. Yes.
Okay. And the final, the policy, the termination policy is already on the agenda for later today, which the board ostensibly will act on later.
So the next item on the agenda.
Oh, that's your.
Okay.
Follow-up questions? One other thing that I think I was going to point out that we talked about earlier on this is, in the event there's a resource issue as well. I mean, if we have, all of a sudden we have multiple school districts like, oh geez, how are we going to handle this? That's another piece of the decision for us as a board to say, we need to do something because this is becoming a bigger issue in the school district like co-op. So I see the transparency, and that's kind of where my head goes to.
Right. I guess what I'm saying is that because they're fee-for-service relationships, the more, we sign up more school districts, we have more need, but we'd also have additional funds to service them.
And there's some issues with that as well. Any other questions? Otherwise, this is an information discussion item. Hearing none, we'll move on to item 3.03. Urgent approval revision to policy LB. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Board President Howard, members of the board, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex. For the record, my name is Maria Murphy, and I am here to discuss action item 3.03, urgent approval of revisions to policy LB, and this is pursuant to the discussion that was held at the last board meeting in January and the discussion that you were just having in the previous item. So this went to the policy subcommittee, and we had some good discussion around it. No major concerns were raised. It was placed on the agency website for public comment. No public comment was received, and at this time I'd like to make myself available for any questions. But I should back up because Superintendent Reichman did request that this be placed in an urgency revision, meaning that you would adopt it in one read instead of the typical 2 reads. And I'd like to make myself available for any questions that may come.
Any questions? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve. Oh, that's right. Thank you. You actually need 2 motions. It's been called up. Right. So a motion to approve for the expedited time frame. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Now entertaining a second motion for the actual approval of the item, correct? Entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt the policy as proposed in item 3.03.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.04, adoption of math curriculum. Superintendent Reichman.
Yes, I'm going to turn this over to Melissa DeVries. She will give just a brief presentation on the math curriculum, and so that you know what we are asking you to adopt as board for the math. Melissa?
Board President Howard, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex, member of the boards. I'm Melissa DeVries. I am a member of the ODD team, and what we're bringing for your consideration tonight is the approval and adoption of the math curriculum. Last year about this time, we came to you with ELA curriculum. This is part of a 5-year cycle of reviewing each of our major content areas and then putting them up for adoption. Over the last several months, and you'll have a form in front of you with the dates, we have formed committees at both campuses, the Tucson campus and the Phoenix campus, to look at and review math materials. It's been up for public review. A rubric was formed. The teachers indicated, based on the rubric scoring, which curriculum that they would like to have at each of the campuses. And I would like to open this up to any questions that you may have regarding the math curriculum.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
This is Shelley.
Shelley, go ahead.
So I noticed that PDSD and ASD and ASB are indicated differently as far as choice for the math curriculum. Can you expand as to why?
Okay. We had separate groups meeting. Both of them looked at the same curriculum, and both of them reflected on what would be best to meet the individual needs of the campuses. PDSD did choose a different curriculum for their campus at the high school level than did ASDB and ASB. And what part of the situation there is the campus at Tucson has been acting as a unified campus. of both those for our visually impaired and hearing impaired students, and they felt that this one curriculum would work best for all of their students. Again, that has a visually impaired population where PTSD has very limited kids with a visual impairment.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
This is Mike Manley. I had a chance to take a look at the curriculums. They all look really great. With regard to the Go Math, are we getting the add-on pieces, the differentiation kits that go with each grade level? Because those are
Yes.
probably really important.
Yes.
They are. Great.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Entertain a motion for action item 3.04.
I move that we adopt the math curriculum as provided.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 3.05, information discussion item, feasibility study on residential program. Superintendent Reichman, I'm assuming this is an update.
You remember last January, we provided a report of the Phase 1 feasibility study. In that report, we looked at the legal, educational, and fiscal implications of our dorm program. We did a survey of the schools for the deaf and the schools for the blind around the country to see if they were keeping their dorm programs open or if they were closing them. We also did an analysis of opportunities and possibilities around the state for relocating the dorm program. So, to follow up with the January board meeting, we reconvened in February to figure out what the next phase, what do we want to do in phase 2. And we decided that we have the purpose of phase 2 would be to focus on continuing investigating on how we can improve or modify the current dorm program. That we would do solicit stakeholder feedback, specifically parents of students who live in the dorm program. And then third, we would do a workforce analysis. That's what we're proposing to do in phase 2. Specific steps that we can take is that, well, first of all, to get feedback from you this afternoon as to next steps. Then to do phone interviews. We've already put together a proposed list of questions for your review on what we can be asking the parents of those students who live on the Tucson campus. Then we would do a workforce analysis of our dorm program to see if we can become more effective, cost efficient, and then provide a report to you in the May 9th board meeting. There's a lot more information in the sheets that you see in board docs, but that just summarizes what we want to do for the phase 2. Once we get your feedback as to what needs to be included, we will do the work in collecting the additional information and providing you with a second report in the May 9th board meeting.
Questions and comments?
I have a question.
Dr. Sims?
There have been people who have been offered to go to the residential program who have decided not to send their children. Will those parents be surveyed as well?
We can. If we know who they are, we can. Absolutely.
Does the agency know who they are?
I'm not sure. person?
We could probably get a list. If it is part of the IEP goals or if that comes into play and the parent says absolutely not, then that would be a name that we could get to contact. I'd have to.
But what if it was recommended or discussed but never made it to the AP?
That I'm not sure.
Can I ask a quick question? Shouldn't anything that's discussed and still not done be represented in the private notice? If it's a survey, it should be just to review the PWNs, and you should be able to find all of them, I would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it should be. That would be a strength.
Additional questions, comments? Dr. Sims, did you hear that response?
This is Linda Bove.
Hi, Linda.
Hi, Mr. President. I'm wondering, when we talk about stakeholders and receiving feedback from our different entities and our different stakeholders, does that also include the board members? How can we deliver feedback? Do you have a plan for that? And as board members, what are our roles and how do we approach this in giving feedback to ASDB and obtaining information? What is your vision, Annette? Can you describe that, please?
I'd not considered including board members, so we've not developed a survey for board members. We would be happy to do that, to include your thoughts and information you have, and put that together into a report.
Okay. That would be great. That not specifically what I mean, but thank you. What I'm trying to say, how can I say this? Will we be the last group to vote on the decision regarding the feasibility study, correct? That will be the end process. Right? Annette, I'm sorry, I can't see you, but I'm assuming that's where we are.
Really, it's up to you, the board, to make that determination. When we finish providing all the information you need, then you decide what you want to do with that information.
Right.
To continue the discussion, to put it on hold, to set up a very specific objective for
Right.
ASDB to follow. That's really up to you.
I see what you're saying, and thank you. I definitely would like to gather all information before I continue with the vote. And I think I'm not sure if that's enough. How sufficient is the information, and how will I know that I have enough information to be able to vote on something? I guess maybe, do I need to make myself a little bit more clear?
Do you mind if I throw in a thought here? So visually and goal-oriented is what I'm hoping to see, means what Linda's saying, and at the same time, one of the objections I've made is I don't think anybody on this board, and I'm making an assumption, or anybody in the community wants to get rid of a residential program. I think what we're trying to do is say, is the one that is in existence now, is it a good one? Is there something better we could be doing? Is there something we can do in northern Arizona where I see personally a need? What is it to make a residential program robust and flexible that are taking care of a myriad of issues? With that said, before I make any kind of decision, I want to hear from stakeholders. I want to have something that is, this is just me, that says I would like to have a work session where we do sit with stakeholders and hear this. What other types of residential programs that aren't necessarily towards the deaf, hard of hearing, and blind are out there that we could look at? I'm looking for solutions and ideas, not a justification of a program that is in Tucson. And before I make any decision,
Right, I'm on board with that.
I want to know what all that is. Now, that might take some time, folks, but I would rather, in my conversations with the superintendent, is I have a very short-term plan, a mid-term plan, and a long-term plan. That all fits into somebody tell me what that time frame is. I don't want to make a quick decision that says, well, we're going to do something right away, because there's just too much at stake.
Right.
I've toured the school, I see it, I see the benefit, but I'm looking at a robust program. What else has worked? Surveys are great. It's one piece of the puzzle. I think we need a lot more information and feedback to make a long-term decision.
I'm right there with you, Dean. I think it's very important. Thank you. It is important, and I'm concerned about if we're given the deadline of May, it might be too close, and I'm not sure if you're invested, but I'm interested in actually going and seeing things in person, firsthand, and actually seeing is believing. You know, not statistics on a piece of paper or something as abstract as a form. I want to be in the depths of it and ask those questions in the moment. I know physically for some of us it's not possible, but I definitely would like to make it possible for myself. As a responsible board member, a voting board member, I think it's an integral part of our duties to be able to travel, and I don't want to rush it like you said, Dean. I do have a schedule, I do have a life, and I can't just put everything to the side, but to work through this process, to give us more time to be able to see what is happening out there. And we can't go as a collective group, I understand that, and it will be an additional work involved to maybe additional meetings, a collective gathering of information. And I think I'd like to bring forth my experiences because yours might not be might be different than mine. So it's important that we come together and share it as a community. So thank you for letting me speak on that.
I don't want to occupy too much of the conversation because I think what I feel, and Superintendent Reichman, if you could correct me, what happens in May is you're going to come back with some more information, but based on that, my vision is that's when we start a work session to have that conversation about what this is going to be.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I'm sorry. And based on what Dr. Sims said is those other folks that chose not to operate in the program, I would like to have them at the table. So beyond the survey.
That's okay. I would just like to add, just looking at the survey here, again, sometimes I don't think we get at what we may not want to hear but really need to know. And so maybe talking to some of the parents that have students here, or some of those parents that chose not to put students at the Tucson campus, asking them if the residential, I see, you know, you're asking if the dormitory wasn't there, but what would an ideal dormitory program look like? If it could be anything, what would it look like to you? I think we need to sort of think outside of that. I also, having had a little bit of conversation with Dean, I think one of the stakeholders we need to also talk to is maybe the students to see where they see a benefit. Or not. You know, they may have just been put here and, you know.
The dorm students.
Or former dorm students.
Right.
Recent graduates.
This is including alumni as well.
Okay. I would say, you know, I wouldn't say alumni 30 years ago necessarily, but I would say alumni in the last, you know, 3 to 5 years.
And this is Lynn, to piggyback on that, I know that we've had some students who have chosen to leave the dorms and go back to their home schools. Mm-hmm. If we could find and get information from them as well.
This is Mike. Can I ask a quick, so I would assume, that's a kind of a scary word to throw out there, but like phase 3, are we going to have like an exploratory group that looks at what options are out there? I mean, regardless of what the feedback that we get, I'm assuming we're going to want to make things better one way or the other. So are we going to look at those other, not necessarily schools for the deaf and blind, but the whole myriad of options that might exist for alternate or more diverse residential programs? I don't even know if I want to use the term residential program, because I think that would cap what we look at, like best practices for how similar cohorts of kids exist in other modalities, but beyond what we're doing, to maybe get an idea of what's already happening that we could steal from and put into place for us, I would assume that's the next, the phase that we're going to include, is to explore options.
We've already done some preliminary exploration. We did some contacts in the northern parts of Arizona to see if there was still boarding school for students who are Native American. And we found that they've essentially all closed. That right now, Tuba City is building a dorm facility that will open in a couple of years, but they don't have dorm facilities currently. So to really compare with other groups, we found it difficult to do that. The one thing when we call it residential program, it's often misunderstood what it means. Residential programs for students who are mentally ill, for students who are in the juvenile detention system, have very different kinds of living arrangements than we do. So if you notice the way I sign, I'm not signing residential program, I'm signing dorm programs, because it really is a dormitory, that the whole focus is on the academic, looking at the FAPE and the IEP and the least restrictive environment. And when the school district and parents make the decision or the determination that for that particular student, the least restrictive environment is to be in a school with like peers, and they happen to live in northeast quadrant of Arizona, well, nothing like that is nearby. And the only way for them to access that kind of academic environment is to actually enroll in ASD or ASB and to live in the dormitories. So it's very different than most other residential programs that we conceive of oftentimes.
I'm aware of a relatively new program that has just opened up as a transition program for students with autism here in Phoenix that includes a dormitory component that might be something to look at, just to see how they are incorporating that, because I know it's term limited. I think they are only allowed to live on the campus for 2 years, so it might be a model to look at.
And that is exactly how I'm hoping that this type of work session evolves into, is those kind of examples coming through. So that's the game plan.
This is Mark Sims here.
Dr. Sims?
We would need the enrollment of the current residential program or dormitory program to see if people are with like peers. I mean, if you have one kid in grade school, then they're not with like peers. So it has to be well attended to be with like peers. So I would like to see the enrollment, the ages, and the distribution.
We can provide that. I thought we included that in our last report, and I'll double check. If we didn't, then we will definitely provide that.
This is Linda. Yes, and I did request that. So Dr. Sims, it is in the report. I did ask that. I didn't have a chance to read it. She just submitted today, but I think we should share that, an itemized list of students enrolled in the dorms.
Awesome. Be pretty clear, Superintendent Reichman?
Yes, yes. So my question is, it seems the next step after the second report is a work study session. So you may want to consider setting up a date so that we can actually do it.
I would say yes to that, and at the same time, I want to be aware of the stakeholders that we need to engage as well. There might be an opportunity to utilize an existing, or Saturdays are fine, but I think sometimes it's a challenge, so we probably need to figure this out. It's a non-answer, I know, but I'm trying to survey monkey it up on a calendar item for Any more questions? Item 3.05. Thank you. We'll move on to 3.06. Statewide Early Learning Program Proposal. Is that you, Superintendent Reichman, as well?
Yes. This is just a brief three-page synopsis here. The 3 pages doesn't really fully reflect the thought, the discussion, the conversation, even some of the agony that's gone into this. But it seems the timing is right now. There's a confluence of events going on. We, the board, the agency, our stakeholders, we all agree the first 5 years of life is critical to each child, each student's success in school and after school, after they graduate from high school. We have currently, as you know, the 0 to 3 program, the Early Childhood Family Education Program. We also have 3 preschools. I didn't really fully understand that myself until a few months ago. The 2 preschools that I knew about, clearly understood, were the 2 that we have. One here at Phoenix Day School for the Deaf and the one on the Tucson campus, the preschool for ASD. We also have a contract with Foundations for Blind Children, FPC, for preschool program there, and they serve the Phoenix metropolitan area. So when we look at the 0 to 3 and the 3 to 5, and those of you who are in the business of early learning, early intervention, know better than I know some of the challenges that occur in that transition between being 2.5 to preschool at 3. And if you look at the data on the second page, you can see very clearly that we have more than 400 families being served by our teachers statewide. But then when you look at the preschool students, you can see that number is much smaller. And I even included those preschool students that are being served by our itinerant teachers in the co-ops. We do have some, not many, but some. So for me, that's a very clear indication that maybe there are missed opportunities here to provide that support in that transition from being 2.5 to 3 and being enrolled in a local preschool. So with that, thinking about this, thinking about the challenges, thinking about the additional funding that we just got. We got $1.6 million, as some of the teachers here have said. We've hired new teachers, we've provided training. Barbara Schwab has worked very hard to integrate the new teachers with existing teachers, to provide them with the mentoring and the support. She's also worked very hard to put together a program evaluation plan with support from others in the agency. So with that, we have a lever now to really push this to the next level. And how do we do that? How do we do that? Our contract with FPC ends this year. We may extend it one more year, but we're looking at maybe expanding the preschool contracts that we have. If we were able to better track the students that are placed in the local preschool, maybe we could develop partnerships with school districts to serve those students, that we can embed our teachers in the regular preschool classroom to support that particular student. I think it's possible. I think there's a lot of different ways you can be doing this. So I'm proposing, I'm not asking for a vote, but just wanted to let you know that we are seriously considering combining under one statewide early learning program director both the ECFU and the preschool programs that we have.
This is Lynn. I have one question.
Can I just ask a clarifying question really quickly of Annette? When you're saying consolidating under one director, does that mean we're focusing on 0 to 5 entirely without dropping, I said losing any children through the cracks in that transitional phase from early childhood to preschool? So there's that continuum without any gaps. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
My question was, will there be any funding issues with the Birth to 3 money that we got?
One thing that some of us don't understand, and myself too, I'm still learning, is that the funding mechanism for 0 to 3 is very different from the funding mechanism for 3 to 5. The 0 to 3, we just use general funds. We have a commitment to serving these students. Before, we were using $2.6 million of general funds to support the program. We got additional funding at 1.6, so total agency commitment is $4 million for the 0 to 3. Now, when they transfer into preschool, they become vouchered. So in actuality, if we could develop partnerships with school districts, then we could get voucher revenue to support our work in supporting those students. The potential is there.
Thank you.
Superintendent, this is David, Board Member Nigro. A couple questions. One, I mean, I think it's a good idea that we're at least user-facing now, looking at the challenge of 0 to 5 as opposed to looking at it from the funding basis, because as you'd mentioned, the funding basis from 0 to 3 is different from 3 to 5, and that's probably explains the large drop-off. Is that at 3, these students become the responsibility of the local school districts, and they may be placed within their local school districts, and then we're not seeing them, and FPC is not seeing them, etc. My question is, would we continue to operate the same preschools, both in Tucson and here, and also fund the FPC preschool, or would we be creating something different in terms of the actual underlying schools when we do this?
My vision was to continue operating what we have currently at PDSD, ASD, and PDSD. Again, I was thinking about the partnership with school districts. What happens here in Phoenix most often is that one school district may have a cluster of students, of 3 or 4-year-olds or that, and then a couple of years later they all disappear. So, and then they have another cluster in another school district. So I'm thinking if we could have a director with the leadership and the expertise and the knowledge, that we could develop partnerships with school districts to do, in the best way I can describe it, is mobile preschool kind of concept. Because one challenge of Phoenix Day School for the Deaf, it had 3, I think up to 3 satellite locations, but the student population changed. We didn't have the support necessary to maintain those programs. We're down to one satellite, which is in Cave Creek, way in the southeast part of the Phoenix metropolitan area. So if we had someone who could really focus on that and create a system, a process, I'm not sure, that is semi-mobile, that can move from location to location depending on where the clusters show up each year. Maybe we could be providing more preschool supports and services.
Okay, and would that be for the blind visually impaired as well? Because the preschools that we operate are only for the deaf, and we don't operate any preschools for the blind.
No, we only operate it through FPC. And on the Tucson campus had a preschool for blind students, and that was closed at some point in time.
This is Mark Sims. I have a comment. I would suggest that you call it birth through transition, because you don't know when the transition is going to occur. For instance, a hearing impaired child can be identified at 2.5 and might not be ready to be mainstreamed if that's what the parents want at 5. So I'm not sure if 5 makes sense as compared to a transition to the next step, whatever that is.
So birth to transition, meaning 0 to 3 or 4 year olds? Is that what you're saying?
Or whatever that transition is.
Well, the transition occurs at about 2.5, 2 3/4.
Not if a child's identified at 3.
If they are identified at 3, they go directly to preschool.
Those are funding structures, not educational structures of where the child is.
Yeah, the way the funding is structured with the vouchers, they are definitely site-based. So if we're talking about 3 and 4 year olds, the expectation is that they will go to a school, a preschool, and be provided the preschool experience there. There are no expectations of services being provided in the home with the family. And there's no funding for that to happen as well.
Well, maybe we need to figure that out, because there are kids who will be identified at 3 or 2.5, and then the parents are very anxious because they're going to lose services at 3. I'm not sure that's in the child's best interest.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? I'm going to sort of piggyback on to what Dr. Sims is saying. For example, I'm aware of a child that's been identified at age 4. And at age 4, putting them into a preschool 3 to 5 program, they're already so behind their peers that it's almost a detriment to try and get them, to plop them in where they are, just not going to succeed. So how do we bridge that and be able to keep them in an environment where they have that exposure and have the ability to catch up without feeling like they are just, chasing the group from the start? It is.
This is starting to get very, very detailed and complicated. So there's a comment off to the side here that this sounds like another work session.
Yes, it does.
I do, and I do believe that we should do that, because this is a new structure, it's a new way of looking at it, and I think for it to be successful, we need to build it strong to make sure that services are being provided equitably across the state, and that our little ones are being, we know how critical those first 5 years are. We don't get them then.
And I would just add to that, maybe we need to educate the legislators to the point of saying, birth, 0 to 3 is an age, but maybe we need to be looking at them and identifying them developmentally in accordance with their peers. So if they're identified at 4, but developmentally, language-wise, they're at 2, then they need services for birth to 3, and the funding should follow them.
Mark's been here. As long as we use the funding as the way we develop our terminology, we'll justify it that way. We should use terminology that's based on the child's state, not on the money. That's why I'm saying birth to transition, whatever that transition is, not based on 5, because that's when preschool ends.
So are you suggesting that birth to transition, and how do we define the transition?
We are the subject matter experts, and we work with the family and the educators to determine when that happens.
So I'm going to have to interject here because we're starting to click against a clock, and I think this is a work session issue that we need to dig deeper because there's a lot of moving parts to it. With that said, I'm also running against a clock of some transportation issues with some folks that I'm being told I need to get some folks out of here by 7. So I want to accommodate everybody I can, but I want to kind of start to move through this agenda if we could. Any other items, any other comments on this item? Otherwise, Annette, I think we're going to have some conversations about work sessions and when we get this brought before us as well. Okay, now I'm off to item 4.14, I believe. Approval of teacher contract template. Superintendent Rex, Assistant Superintendent Rex, excuse me.
Yes, in the January meeting, the rough draft was brought for some discussion and comment. And if you have any more questions, we have people we would like to issue contracts to, but we want to make sure that we are doing it with the proper template, which we have been given. At this point, it is a very simplified version that we worked with the AG's office to develop.
Any questions on that? A quick question about that is we've never really operated under one, but now we're trying to develop a baseline for one, correct?
Anita and I actually went through HR and we found that contracts were issued in the early 80s. I have people that have actually signed contracts. And if you lay the basic template that was developed, it looks similar without some of the legislative things that changed. So they have existed at ASDB. Neither one of us could determine the why of them going away. But we're in a rebuilding stage for sure, and as we go through the process, there'll have to be more input and whatnot. But at this point, we have the AG's basic template.
This is Lynn, and my jaw has dropped. Our teachers have not had contracts prior to this.
Anita, could you step up to the mic to explain the whole letter of intent thing?
I sign one every year.
I am from public education. I understand this, but I am also an employee of ASDB, and I'm learning slowly, and it's confusing.
Can I ask a quick, this is Mike, is this because the ASDB is seen as an institution by law and not a school?
It bounced, yes, as far as we could figure, it bounced back and forth. But we have worked with the Attorney General. When I came on in 2016, it was one of the plates that was handed to me from the Assistant Superintendent at the time, and we've been working on it since then. And there's a lot of reasons we'd like to do it, but...
That is correct, according to Dr. Rex. In looking at some of our seasoned employees, I was able to go back and verify that from around 1977 to the early 80s, we did have contracts. And like she said, there was no rhyme or reason why we could determine why
they went from contract to intent to return. I can only assume maybe that was administration changes.
Any additional questions? If hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve.
Second. Sorry, I move to approve of Agenda 414.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. Item 5.01, information discussion items, Finance Committee report.
Good evening, Board President Howard, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex, members of the board, and the ASDB community. Our most recent Finance Committee meeting was held on February 27th with board members Manley and Gordon and Superintendent Reichman. In that meeting, we discussed some informational items and we reviewed the financial reports for the months ended January 31, 2019 and 2018. As you can see in the beginning of my report, a few informational items have been identified and added. The first being the $900,000 that we received as one of the beneficiaries of the state's Volkswagen settlement, and of that amount, ASDB will receive $700,000 in fiscal year 2019 and the remaining $200,000 in fiscal year 2020. ASDB plans to use the Volkswagen settlement monies to purchase 6 new school buses in fiscal year 2019. And because ASDB is able to use the monies from the Volkswagen settlement for school bus replacements in fiscal year 2019, we requested and we were approved by the Governor's Office of Strategic Planning and Budgeting an appropriation transfer to shift $369,000 of the $738,000 from the school bus replacement line item to our operating budget, which we expect to purchase up to 15 new general fleet vehicles for the regional cooperatives. We will request another appropriation transfer in fiscal year 2020 and submit a decision package with our OSPB budget submission to have ongoing funding included in the baseline beginning in fiscal year 2021 for the refresh purchasing of the general fleet vehicles. The second informational item relates to the 2020 baseline report. The Joint Legislative Budget Committee baseline was published in January 2019, and it shows an estimated increase of approximately $791,300 as identified on page 1 of my report, and it includes our appropriated funds from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 20. It should be noted that the baseline provides only an estimate of the state's general fund balances and does not represent a budget proposal, but it is an estimate of available resources after the statutory requirements. The approved fiscal year 2020 appropriations report is expected to be published by the Joint Legislative Budget Committee in June, and I expect to be able to provide any updates to our appropriations in the July board meeting. In summary, the fiscal year 2020 baseline includes an increase of approximately $1.3 million from the Schools for the Deaf and the Blind Fund, which consists of about $695,000 for a base adjustment due to higher than budgeted costs for our special vouchers, as well as $245,000 for a base level increase of 2% for inflation. The remaining $322,000 is for an additional base level increase for the teacher pay raises, and the amount of the additional base level increase may increase by an additional 5% in the spring of 2019 after additional formula data for the fiscal year 2019 becomes available. Also, as we've been discussing in the meeting tonight, you will recall in the fiscal year 2019 budget, we were appropriated $2.1 million from the telecommunication fund to fund the additional 21 early intervention specialists. Of that amount, $1.6 million is to begin funding, or will be ongoing, to fund the intervention specialist salaries, and the $470,000 was just one-time funding in fiscal year 2019, and that was to purchase the fleet vehicles for each of those intervention specialists. What the fiscal year 2020 baseline does, it shifts it from the telecommunication fund, the $1.6 million, to the general fund, and removes the one-time funding of the $470,000. To also briefly summarize the fiscal reports as discussed in the Finance Committee meeting, there were 539.9 FTE, full-time equivalents, and about 111 vacant positions. Those vacancies include about 37 teachers, 15 instructional assistants, 3 residential service assistants, 18 educational interpreters, about 14 bus drivers, and 24 various other positions. As of February 2019, we've had about 2,079 students. In comparison to February 2018, we had 2,110 students. It was suggested in the Finance Committee meeting that I provide student enrollment data, and you can also see that on page 6 of the report that was submitted. And what I attempted to do was sort it by disability, and then also show you that by revenue source. And when I mean revenue source, identifying the number of students that we receive voucher for, and then also identifying the number of students that we receive, do the fee for services as well. And just as a base of clarification, based on some comments that were made this evening, 75% of our total program costs for expenditures are attributed to our students, not the 45%. Also, it's noted that 15% of the expenditures relates to administration, and the remaining 12% is for agency-wide services, which would include telecommunication as well as facilities. As shown on page 7, as it relates to the collected revenues, our revenues are approximately $1.8 million lower compared to budget fiscal year 2018, and it's due to the decrease in voucher revenues, which we thought was attributed to a $2.1 million advance from the Department of Education that was received in September 2017, but we are currently performing some additional analysis to further determine that decrease from BFY 2019 to BFY 2018, as we believe it may relate to the decrease in the hearing impaired as well as the multiple disability students. So we are still conducting some analysis on that. And it should be noted, based on our year-end projections, voucher revenues will be about $3 million less than anticipated. We budgeted $26 million for voucher students, but the way we are projecting, it is expected to come in anywhere between $23 to $24 million. Also on page 7, you'll see that our expenditures of about $31.1 million has been expended, which is about 54.3% of the budget, and 58.8% of the budget was expended last year. Expenditures have increased due to the amount of the other operating expenses of equipment, and as a reminder again, the $500,000 that we expended for the emergency gas repairs on the Tucson campus. There have also been an increase due to the earlier payment of receiving the risk management invoice, as well as some increase in expenses for books and subscriptions from the Title I grant. We've also had some increases in expenses in some translation, as well, translation and sign language services. And then also our equipment line has increased because of the one-time funding that we received in fiscal year 2019, which was the $470,000. In the spirit of transparency, we are expecting our expenditures to come in at an expected $1 million budget to actual deficit. And as I mentioned, coupled the expenditures of the $1 million and the $3 million for the revenues that are coming in lower, we're projecting anywhere from a $1 million to $2 million use of our available cash balance. As a result, as the Executive Director of Business Services, I will continue to monitor our revenues and expenses, and will take any additional fiscal steps as needed to rectify the situation. Last but not least, our BFY19 encumbrances have been lower than last year, and that's primarily due to the transition from the statewide e-procurement system, which I've mentioned previously. We transitioned from the Procure AZ system to the new state system, APP. Although the system went live in October of 2018, ASDB did not begin going live until February of this year, and that was due to some challenges internally with trying to make sure all of our users had the full functionality to enter the requisitions, and we did not really fully begin utilizing the system until then. I have participated in other CFO meetings through the state, and it was not just an ASDB issue, it was a statewide issue. But as a result of the delay, we did have to do manual purchase orders, which have not been reflected in the reports that I have provided. I will expect that the next report that I provide for the next meeting, the encumbrances will be up to date. And that concludes the March report based on the data as of January 31st. And I'll open it up for any questions at this time.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Let's go on page 9 of the report. There is a report of expenditures by program, fiscal year to date. And I want to confirm with you that under the regional cooperatives, we've spent about $8.9 million, or 28.8% of the total budget for the agency. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what are the classes of things that are purchased with that money? Is it equipment? Is it labor? What exactly does that money go?
It would be all inclusive of all of the expenses.
Okay. And we would expect that by the end of the fiscal year, that 20% share will be consistent. We would think it's about 30% or so of the agency budget.
The way it's trending compared to prior years, yes, roughly at about 30%.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? And none. Thank you. On to item 7.01, introduction and possible discussion of policies JL and EEDE.
Good evening once again, members of the board. You have before you the red lines of policies JL and EEDE. These policies were submitted to the board subcommittee. No major concerns brought up. They were also posted to the website for public comment. No public comment was received, and at this time I'd like to make myself available for any questions.
Any questions? Again, hearing none. Thank you for the update. Okay, item 7.05, Ombudsman Report.
Good evening, President Howard, Superintendent Reichman, Assistant Superintendent Rex, board members, and the rest of the community. So the ombudsman position, the office, aka me, has been around for almost 6 months now, and I will have a report for you at the next meeting that we have so that you can actually get some data. The data is pretty small still. As of beginning in October of last year, I have had 15 inquiries, and those are from all of our different constituent groups, except for students. So I've heard from folks who are parents, community members, and mainly staff. For the most part, those have been resolved through mediation, and many of those inquiries are questions about how to proceed. And just as a reminder, for those of you, since this is a new position, it is intended to be a third track so that folks have an option to grievance or complaints. They can come to me and I can assist either with questions or in resolving whatever their issue is. So that's the data so far, and hopefully we'll have more to report. One of the things that came up during the last meeting was some questions about how we could make the office a little more visible. So I have been working on that with the talented staff at ASDB, Erin Moya. And we are developing a brochure that will then work on a dissemination process with Superintendent Reichman and her staff. And we are developing forms that will be accessible on the website. There'll be a larger presence on the ASDB website with a form that can be submitted directly to me. We've established an Ombudsman address that will come directly to me. Again, everything is confidential. And we are also going to be adding a icon to the portal that is stationed at the computers that are stationed at several different locations around ASDB, so that staff can access that and easily submit a form if they have an inquiry. And then finally, we're developing a survey so that that will be sent out automatically 2 weeks after, hopefully, the resolution with me or the individual who's expressed the concern is done working with the Ombudsman Office. And that survey will ask questions about how they decided to proceed. Hopefully we'll have, and I'll be presenting that to you at the next board meeting for your review, but it will be hopefully a way to determine the efficacy of their involvement with the Ombudsman Office. Any questions?
Thank you for the update. Any questions? Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'm going to go to item 8.01 now. I have not forgot about item 1.04 at this point. I know there might be some folks that are here to still speak. Based on that, I think there might be a conversation to have about future agenda items for the board, and I'm entertaining a conversation to have about that particular issue. What was that, Dr. Sims?
Yeah, I would like to consider the work study group in May to be about the equity issue, what that means to the board, what that means to the administration, and what that means to various stakeholders. We're throwing the word around, but we need to define it and talk about what we mean as a whole group, what it is.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, just to clarify, based on work session immediately following the May board meeting to have the dialogue about the, we'll just call it the equity issue, correct?
Yes, please.
Okay. Superintendent Reichman, are we okay with that?
I'm not sure I understand what you mean by the inequity issues.
I didn't say inequity, I said equity. It's a word being thrown around, justifying different policies or questioning policies. So we as a group should probably talk about what we all have as a concept of equity and how we're applying it across the agency and how stakeholders should perceive it as well.
Okay, Dr. Sims, you're also talking about in relation to the co-ops, all the above.
Yes.
Okay, we will definitely have that item on. Any other agenda items that we would like to have? Oh, by the way, and Superintendent Reichman, I think we need to also have a conversation about that meeting is scheduled for Tucson. I highly recommend, and we got to figure this out, is potentially have it here in Phoenix.
You think the board can decide to have the meeting here in Phoenix?
I don't know if that's a formal motion. I think it might have to be.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it requires a motion.
So based on that,
Well, I don't believe this is an action item.
I'm sorry, this is Shelley. So what's the reasoning for having the meeting here in Phoenix?
well, my impression is that I have a lot of people from northern Arizona that are very interested in this issue. And rather than have them travel all the way from Tucson, let's put it in the middle again and have it in Phoenix. We can flip board meetings to the Tucson meeting in June. sense?
Okay, this is Shelley. I was hoping to meet with students who are living in the dorms, and so that we could talk with them during that board meeting or previous to the board meeting to figure out what they are feeling if we're discussing possible closure of the dorms.
Okay, so let me rephrase that, because we're not talking possible closure of a dorm. I think I said it at the very beginning of the meeting as well. I'm sorry.
Just for point of clarification, I think that Shelley was saying the dorms close in June for summer.
I'm mistaken if that
Correction
was
to
the
the
interpretation.
interpretation.
I just want, like, I keep saying it
Yes,
over
I'm
and
sorry.
over.
Correction to the interpretation. School will be ending in June. They'll be on summer break, so I want to make sure that we could talk to them prior to that.
How do we, okay, I need help with this because I totally get that. I'm struggling with the issue of there's a paramount problem that we're facing specific to the relationships with Flagstaff. With that conversation, I need to get stakeholders in a room to start to solve this problem because it's just not going to get any better. And I also hear what you're saying, Shelley, is we need to meet with the students before they go on summer break. So I didn't mean to come across that hard, but I agree. I'm not sure how to do this. Sure, I'll give you that. Please be brief. All right.
We would be the only family coming from Tucson, or from Flagstaff. So please hold your meeting in Tucson, because there's lots of Tucson families that aren't here today because they're trying to get up here from I-10, and I-10's a bloody nightmare. And so Tucson would be fine because the people who can't speak here tonight would be speaking in Tucson.
Okay. I appreciate that very much. That solves our dilemma.
Oh, also, this is Shelley.
That's fine. I think what we're talking about now is, I think what we're talking about now is having the May board meeting in Tucson, keep it the way it is, work session immediately following in Tucson.
And so I'd like to add to the agenda to involve the students, to have them come and speak with us.
I hear you. And I think, are we talking another work session or during the regular board meeting?
Will we be having a work session in Tucson?
Yes, but I think the thought process is we have a regular board meeting followed by a work session to talk about the equity issue.
But we can do it before.
And this is Linda.
Yeah, because we've done that before. I met with some of the students before last summer, and they were there for a camp, and that worked out well. We did it, I think, an hour and a half before. So.
Yep, I'd be willing to do that as well.
Yeah, I think Shelley met with me at that meeting.
This is Linda. I just want to emphasize, at the last meeting, I felt I didn't really like the idea of having a work session after the board meeting. I'm not a huge fan of that. To be honest, it feels very rushed. We have the meeting and then we have our work session and then we all leave. And I think something more like a retreat, a full day, half a day, I think we need to make time for something like that. We really do. A meeting after a board meeting, it just feels like another board meeting where we go round and round in discussions. I'd like to have an agenda created. I would like to ask that we have time set aside for a retreat, whatever we want to call it, a work session or a retreat, not just 2 hours after a board meeting.
This is Suke. I was just going to throw out there as a possibility if we could meet with students prior to the board meeting and maybe have a topic-specific discussion with some of the stakeholders in a time-limited forum after the board meeting, so that we hit both stakeholder groups and have specific topics for each of those. And then I would agree, I think we need to look at a half-day, whole-day session, retreat type of thing to get at some of the other meatier issues at a later date.
So maybe we can capture both, and maybe if I'm hearing you right, CK, could we potentially do the board meeting followed by an information session, if you will, and then a full-blown work session to kind of come up with some solutions and ideas based on what you're saying at a retreat. It's going to take a lot of time, but I think it's important enough that we start to air this out. So
yes.
And
I
Shelley,
would
we're
agree.
okay with doing something before with the students. I really enjoyed
Yes,
that too.
yeah.
This is Mark Sims here.
Dr. Sims.
Just for the history, we tried twice to schedule Saturday retreats, and people's schedules were so complex that one time we couldn't get a quorum, and the other time we could only get 5 people. So it's not because people don't want to do it. It's just people have complex lives, and getting a time where everybody can get together is difficult. People have already set the time aside for the board meeting, so it kind of works as a natural progression to just go into it. It's a long day, rushed, and it's not ideal, but everybody gets together more regularly with the work study than they have with the retreats in the past.
This is Linda. Okay. Okay, yeah, so I can see your point. So that would mean then a work session. I'd like to have specific agenda items laid out, and that's what we stick to. I don't want it to just be open-ended because then we digress. And so I do value your time. I want you to value my time. And so I would expect that all the board members would make a retreat a priority. I mean, that's one of the reasons we're on this board. So why are you here in the first place if not to make time outside of the board meetings as well?
Okay, point taken. Let's make an attempt at it. I think
Thank you.
it's
Yeah,
important enough to
Hamilton.
do as well. Are we clear on the agenda items for the next meeting? Are there any others that we want to bring to the next or future board meetings?
Future, the work session for the birth through 5. We need to look at that since we're going to be looking at a kind of a new position and how that's going to look.
I think we definitely need to prepare for that too. Any other items? Now, I don't know if I need to come back to item 1.04, call to the public, or not. If so, I don't know your name, so I've got 13 slips. So if you want to come up and tell us who you are, and you've got 3 minutes. Gina? Okay, come on up, Gina.
President Howard?
Yes, sir.
This is Mike Gordon. I'm on the line. I've been up for about 6 minutes.
Hi, Mike. Welcome. We're almost there. We're almost done, actually. Perfect timing.
Thank you.
Gina, before you speak, I'm just going to make sure that everybody understands that the names on these sheets are entered into the public record, so there will be a documentation of it. Gina, I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Please proceed.
I would like to just start by thanking the members of the board for their service, and I also appreciate you taking the time to hear the very important issues that come with the equality and the spending, and I appreciate you taking the time to be willing to put that on the agenda to be looked at in a bipartisan way that everybody will be able to see what is truly clearly going on here. And I want to thank you for your time, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Perfect. Thank you very much. If there are no other speakers, I'm going to move to item number 9, is adjournment.
I move we adjourn this meeting.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Uh-oh. They're in your stack? Come on up and state your name. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to speak. Good call. Just make sure you state your name. And how many are there? You got a couple of you up here? Come on up.
Hello, my name is Amanda Steele. Thank you, ASDB school board members, for allowing me to speak tonight. Tonight, I want to direct my comments to the lack of availability for children's service in regional cooperatives to assist technology devices to utilize in the instruction of their vision impairment services. As proven in the materials provided by Danny to the school board as a result of their open records request to indicate that there is a clear discrepancy statewide in what is available for visually impaired children living in regional areas versus metro areas. These discrepancies make decisions for families that receive ASDB services without them knowing it. In the case of Sawyer's family, they have a child entering middle school far less prepared than his peers living in Tucson, all due to his geographic location. For 5 years, Sawyer received Braille education services with nothing more than a Perkins Brailler because those working in the education services in the North Central Regional Cooperative were untrained themselves in modern devices that help visually impaired students. ASDB staff didn't know what to recommend. They weren't exposed to what would be helpful. They were never offered in-services or annual training to show those interacting with children what was available. Visual impairment has been substantially benefited overall because of changes in technology and given the blind a new access to their world. Without those in charge of instruction being exposed to new and developing technology, they wouldn't know what would be helpful to the students they work with daily. In materials provided to you earlier this week, you can see that in regional cooperatives there is a clear strategy for selection magnification for instruction versus simply teaching children how to read Braille with technology. In the Southwest Regional Cooperative, for example, students have far greater access to technology devices like the Braille Apex or Braille Note Touch, while in the North Central Cooperative, students are lucky to get a VisioBook magnifier, a device that has been discontinued and no longer being supported, but literally being purchased annually by this organization. This availability chooses an educational path for families that varies based on organization. This is discriminatory and it needs to stop. As a state-funded entity, ASDB has an obligation to service with equity and fairness, which neither has been shown in this case of assistive technology. Tonight I am specifically requesting that this board of directors ask ASDB administration to investigate this lack of equity specific to the availability of technology for visually impaired students living in regional cooperatives. Students shouldn't have to move from families to get access to something that children living in metro areas have. This practice of separating families who live in rural parts of the state to satisfy technology needs is absolutely ridiculous. And as an AZ taxpayer, I've taken notice and I'm outraged. Please train your staff, provide tools for children to use education equitably, and seek innovation. Live your mission statement. It is about time. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second speaker? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
Thank you so much for allowing us to speak.
Oh, can you please state your name? I'm sorry.
My name is Susie Turay.
Gotcha. Thank you, Susie.
So this evening I wanted to speak to the issues of relocating students in rural parts of Arizona to receive services that children in metro areas get. It's disturbing to me and it hurts my heart as I'm also a mom of a child with a disability. This week, ASDB admitted in the Green Family's IEP meeting that they cannot deliver the services that Sawyer's peers in Tucson get and recommended day school placement, suggesting that this family should be split up and that siblings should live separate from each other. That as a parent, it just hurts my heart. And I lost my spot, I'm sorry. They just shouldn't be split up. And asking a parent to end their career and to move because ASDB can't simply provide keyboarding instruction in Flagstaff is just saddening. Keyboarding instruction is a necessary skill for all students, but most especially the visually impaired deaf students. If the state school for the deaf and the blind students doesn't provide this, who does? The real answer is that ASDB does provide this service just in Tucson and Phoenix, and it doesn't offer it to the 74% of its student body population living in cooperatives and 49% of its revenue source. Or maybe it's just a service that ASBA is refusing to provide to this family, which I really hope it's not. it's shameful and, well, it's just saddening that this, you know, I just hope that the school board would really look at this, because I had some other words, but I'll change it for the second. Just because basically, you know, the needs of these families aren't so great to warrant this suggestion. You know, the hardship placed on the school districts that have to live with this recommendation should be noted. A school district has a federal obligation to provide services, and this suggestion comes at the cost for a family that creates liability. And most of rural Arizona and the school districts, in most of rural Arizona school districts that are contracting with ASDB for services are running on funding that is dwindling. ASDB not being able to provide equitable services and suggesting relocating for families exposes districts to lawsuit. And ASDB is not a good steward to those who they serve, whether that is students or school districts.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, please.
Okay, so basically what I'm trying to say to you is that when I look at your funds, I'm seeing $771 per student per year for a child to receive these services. And I'm looking at how much these other schools are making per student. There's a very big difference, and I don't understand where that's coming from. I'm really confused on that. And I really I'm here and asking that you look at that and reconsider where that money's going. Thank you.
Thank you. Hearing no more speakers, the cards have been turned in. I still have a motion on the table for adjournment with a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody.